Superintendent of the Torrance Unified School District, and it's great to see all of you out here tonight. We appreciate the numbers of people who came tonight to hear about the Common Core. Many of you who have heard me speak before about this school year, it is a year of change, and by that, two big changes for school districts in California. The first, and we'll talk a little bit about this, but not much tonight, is the new change in the funding formula to the local control funding formula, the first change in the funding formula for schools in 40 years in California. So we will give you a little overview of that because it kind of fits part and parcel. The other one, of course, is the movement of to Common Core and the Common Core standards. A huge change for school districts, not only in California, but in other states as well. In California, it's the first big change really in 15 years, back to 1998, when the state of California adopted the California standards. With us tonight, I'd just like to make some very quick introductions, if you'd hold your applause. Members of our Board of Education, Michael Wormers, who currently is the president, Terry Reagans, Martha Deutsch, and Don Lee. Martha's back there, Mark's back there, Mark Steffen also. Thank you, our members of our Board of Education. Members of our cabinet that are here, and they'll just raise their hand for you. Dr. Don Stabler, who's our Deputy Superintendent. Dr. Tim Stowe, who you will hear from more as the program goes on tonight. He is our Chief Academic Officer. Dr. Anisha Dugal, our Senior Director for Secondary Schools. Dr. Edan Kim, our Senior Director for Elementary Schools. And Dr. Mario Liberati, our Senior Director for Human Resources, all part of the Superintendent's Cabinet. Also with us tonight, we have one City Council member, Mr. Cliff Newmark. This is really a joint project tonight. It has been planned and worked toward for our PTA Council. And with us tonight are many PTA members in this audience. We appreciate you very much. But one of the people who we started working with on this presentation way back in the summer, our President, Janet Taji. Janet, raise your hand. Thank you, Janet. Also, a person who sat up and worked very hard on just all the small things, which sometimes you don't even recognize unless they go wrong, and then you recognize them, our Public Information Officer, Tammy Kahn, who's in the back of the room. So with no further ado, we're going to start the program. I'm going to talk a little bit about the local control funding formula. And with me is Dr. Don Stabler, and Don will carry it from the part that I leave off. Many of you in the audience may have participated with us in the past years where we did Finance 101. Don and I used to do that for parents, where we would talk about what and how schools are financed in the state of California. So a little bit of history with that. Before the LCFF, which would have been last school year, the amount of money each district received per student was called the revenue limit. And districts also received funds called categorical funding. And these were restricted for particular uses, and we'll just throw some out for you. Textbook, art and music, gifted, physical education, school safety, on and on and on. There are really 80 in the state. Torrance Unified received 43 separate fundings. Now, some of you have heard me speak, excuse me, that what that is really like is I have money in one pocket, money in another pocket, money in another pocket, but I couldn't move the money because it had to go for specific reasons and causes. The governor decided that that really wasn't a good idea. And therefore, working with the Assembly, and it really is his program, he developed the local control funding formula, which is a very different way of funding schools. It is a fundamental change in school districts across the state, and as I said, It's the first one in 40 years. Now, most of you in the audience know we had issues with the last funding formula. We were a low wealth district. We fought those issues for many years, not only me, but the superintendents who preceded me. And so we wanted to do the local control funding formula right. There are parts of it which we believe the governor is correct. There are other parts which we don't agree with the governor on. But now is the time where we have to make this work. And that's really where we are today, is attempting to work with the LCFF and make it work. And now for LCFF information, Dr. Don Stabler.
Thank you, Dr. Mannon. As he said, this is a fundamental change, and primarily there are going to be two pockets of money. Instead of the major pocket of revenue limit and all categoricals, which are, as he said, 40 different programs, there are going to be two pockets of money starting actually this year. One is what we call base program, and that's for base every student in Torrance Unified. There is another pocket of money, which in our district is called supplemental funds, and those are funds specifically for English language learners, free and reduced price meal program students, and foster youth. Two pots of money. Now in some districts there's actually three pots, but because of our population we have two pots. Also part of this is the state is saying every district has to develop what they call a local control accountability plan. It's going to involve all of you, it'll involve other parents, teachers, classified people, administrators, and we have to come up with a plan of how we are going to utilize that extra money for what they call the target students. Local flexibility, and that's one of the big things that we have fought for, and you see in this program on how there will be local flexibility on how to spend the money pending final regulations. Okay, what is the funding formula? First of all, it's an 8-year phase-in period with full implementation happening in the 2021 school year. As Dr. Mann had said, we've had some rough times. Starting in 2007, our budget has been deficited, reduced by over 25%. That's $50 million that we've lost from where we were at in 2007 to where we are now. The idea is to bring us back up to where we were in 2007. That doesn't sound like a very good goal, but it's better than what we have been working with. And as I said, there are two parts to it. First of all is the base grant. In 2013-14 target, it's not fully funded based on grade level. These are the amounts of money that we would receive for each individual student dependent on the grade level that they're in, from anywhere from $6,900 to $8,400. In addition, K-3, kindergarten through third grade, will receive funding for class size reduction. We used to be at 20, we've gone up to 30 because of the deficit, because of the reductions we had to do. We're back down to 28. The intent is to get it down to 24 or whatever is locally negotiated. And in 9-12, they're going to receive some extra funding for career technical education. The state does not designate the use, but services, goods still need to be provided, like textbooks, deferred maintenance, and that type of thing. I mentioned a little bit about the supplemental grant. Districts that have between 0 and 55% of their population that are either limited English or free and reduced get what is called a supplemental grant. That means 20% of those dollar amounts I showed you on the last page will be given to us for these particular students. Now, other districts, not Torrance, because our population, our number in that population is only 36%, receive what is called a concentration grant. That's a third bucket of money, and those are for districts with over 55% of their students in those categories will receive additional funding. Again, Torrance does not qualify for that funding. Funding per pupil. This year, actual 2007-8, under previous funding model, we were getting $7,200 per student. Actual 2012-13, under the previous funding model, we were getting $6,400 per student. Estimated 2012-13 fully funding amount adjusted for cost of living should have been $8,300. What we're getting this year is $6,681. So we're nowhere near what we should be getting, but you can see it's a little bit better than what we got last year. The target for Torrance, type of students and everything, for full implementation in 2021 is $9,692. That still will put us probably 45th in the United States. For comparison, 2020-21 statewide average for full implementation is estimated at $10,800. So again, Torrance will still be a low wealth school district. Okay, accountability. I and Dr. Stowe have spent a little bit of time in Sacramento testifying for various Senate, Assembly, State Board of Education meetings concerning this issue on accountability. There are people in Sacramento who, for whatever reason, don't trust local boards and local groups of parents. They want to tell us how we're going to spend this money on these particular kids. What we have pushed hard for, Torrance is unique. Torrance knows what we need for our kids. You as parents, our staff, we know what we need for our students, and we should be able to do what is best for them. In order to do that, we have to adopt a local control accountability plan, and it's based on a template that the State Board of Education will adopt. This LCAP must be linked to the district's budget and updated annually. The LCAP will describe goals as well as actions to be taken to achieve those goals related to specific state priorities for all students and for subgroups. The LCAP may include state priorities such as student achievement, student engagement, school climate, basic services, implementation of Common Core, access to broad curriculum, parent involvement, and pupil outcomes. How are we supposed to go through the adoption and updating the LCAP? First of all, it's consultation, talking to various people here in Torrance, whether it's the teachers, principals, school personnel, pupils, local bargaining units, and then we talk to the parent advisory committees, the English learner committees, and then the superintendent must respond to those comments in writing. There's going to be plenty of opportunity for public input. There'll be opportunity to submit written comment. There'll be public hearings. The superintendent, again, Dr. Mannon, must respond to those writings. And then there has to be an adoption of the plan. The adopted concurrent with the district's budget. We adopt our budget in June. At that same time, we're going to have to take to the board an adopted LCAP. It has to be submitted to the County Office of Education for their approval. It'll be posted on our website, and then what the COE, County Office of Education, does with the LCAP, they will again post it for each district on a link to the LCAP. Timeline. January 1st, 2014, State Board of Education will adopt budget standards and criteria. Actually, Dr. Stowe and I are going up November 7th to appear before the State Board of Education, because that's when they're going to adopt their emergency regulation. January 31st, they must adopt spending regulations. Right now, they're going to be emergency regulations for the remainder of this year and moving into next year. March 31st, they will adopt what they call the LCAP templates. By July 1, we must adopt our budget, and we do that in June, and at the same time, we have to adopt the LCAP. By October 1st, they're going to adopt technical assistance and intervention evaluation rubric. Like anything else, there are going to be some districts that aren't making their LCAP. That's what it talks about, their intervention evaluation rubric. And then finally, by 2020, 2021, it's supposed to be full funding of the LCFF. We'll just have to wait and see if that happens. Uncertainties. This is why I say we have to wait to see if that happens. About 2 months ago, the California Department of Education on its website put out this statement. If you're a business person, you know the frustration that myself and Dr. Mann and the board and our staff are going through when the California Department of Education puts out the statement. They cannot immediately determine how much Torrance Unified, we're an LEA, local education agency, is entitled to receive during the transition period under LCFF. I'm supposed to run a $200 million budget without knowing for sure how much money I'm going to be getting, including the components of the LCFF, such as our supplemental or concentration grant. Until State Board of Education has adopted the spending regulations, the extent to which districts have flexibility over expenditure of supplemental and concentration grants is uncertain. The good news, the draft of what the State Board of Education is considering for November 7th gives local districts like Torrance local control, and that's the good news. Until prior revenue limit and categorical program model, there are no state statutes, unlike that, there are no state statutes that specify an annual appropriation to support it. Again, we're expected to run a program not knowing exactly what our revenues are. A district's annual entitlement will be determined by any available appropriations. We were pretty certain, even though when it was deficit, we were pretty certain on what money we would get because it was regulated by what was called Prop 98. That doesn't fit anymore. So now we're at the, I guess, we have to believe in the state legislature and the governor to give us the money. This makes multi-year planning very difficult. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Don. You will hear much more about this in the coming months. That's the reason we wanted to introduce it to you tonight, and this certainly is just an introduction. And now for the rest of the program, which you're really here to see tonight, it's my pleasure to introduce the Chief Academic Officer of our school district, Dr. Tim Stowe.
Thank you, Dr. Mannon. Well, you're not here just to see me. We have a lot of teachers that have put in a lot of time and effort to make tonight possible, and they'll be doing sessions in each of those breakout rooms. I'd also like to recognize, I don't know where they are, Mr. Ben Egan is the Director of State and Federal Projects, and Dr. Ramona Cheng, the Director of Curriculum in the back, who are also instrumental in making this night of this event happen, especially the work with the teachers. Now, just some overview about tonight. You're going to get a presentation from me about the general 35,000 foot view of Common Core. And then you're going to get some specific information from teachers that work in the classroom. There are leaders that are implementing Common Core now, trying things with your students, and really seeing fantastic results. And so you have the program, they're broken out into 4 different grade levels. We're running, because we have so many people here tonight, we're running 16 sessions. There are 2 sessions for each content area in the first half hour, and those same 2 sessions for each content area replicate. So for example, at 7:25 we'll have 2 sessions for K2 English, 2 sessions for K2 Math, and so on. So it's outlined in the program. If you have questions, you can see a variety of folks here that can help you tonight. We also have some translators available, so if you need translations, we've got some of our translators that work at the district over against the wall there for Spanish, Korean, and Japanese. So if you need translation, you can make your way over there now or work with them to go through the appropriate session for you. Now, standards are not new in the state of California. And you can see from this graphic that California was one of the leaders in the nation with regard to creating rigorous standards for students. And we've been giving the CSTs, or the STAR testing, since 1999. Those bottom 2 arrows show the change. And so as we move forward into the Common Core are our new standards, and we will be giving what we call the Smarter Balanced Assessments that I'll discuss in a little bit. So for STAR testing in 2014, last month the governor made a lot of news by signing Assembly Bill 484, What 484 does is eliminate STAR testing for all subjects except science in grades 5, 8, and 10, and Kappa, which is for some of our special education students. And so what this allows for is for us to really focus on implementing the Common Core and making sure that our teachers aren't held to two different standards. One, to make sure students do well on the CSTs, and the other to make sure that they're beginning to implement Common Core standards, which we will be assessing for in the spring of 2015. Other implications for AB 484 very quickly. The API, or the Academic Performance Index, is suspended, so that you won't see a new number that ranks schools until the summer of 2015. That new ranking system will be called the MAP, or the Measurement of Academic Performance and Progress. We will also be doing field testing. Districts throughout the state will be giving 50% of their students field test questions in the spring. These will not result in any test scores or data back to schools or parents or districts. They're specifically by the test maker so that they can field test these questions to make sure that the spring of 2015 has valid and reliable test information. I see some of you taking notes. This presentation will also be on the district website following tonight. And then finally, in the spring of 2015, well, I mentioned that, the first assessments for Smarter Balance will be given, and those will be in English Language Arts and Math for students in grades 3 through 8 and grade 11. What's missing from here, and kind of what we're used to, is there's no second grade exam, there's no 9th or 10th grade exam. We still will be giving the California High School Exit Exam to all sophomores. And I can see some of you calculating, is my kid going to be in a particular grade? Are they going to get out of it for a year or so? So that's what we're testing. Now, when it comes to Common Core, we all have high expectations for our students, whether you're a parent or a teacher or a member of the community. And I show you this slide from the Bureau of Labor Statistics from 2010 that just basically mirrors what many of us know. And that is that the more education you have, the more money you make, the lower unemployment rate there is. And so while we all know certain exceptions to this rule, we want our kids to be the best prepared they can be. And we get that by making sure that they leave our schools, K-12 and college and career ready. And there's also some research done that shows that the information or the knowledge and skills that one needs to be successful in a career are the same, about 80 to 90% overlap, essential knowledge and skills that you need to be successful in college. And so we're really gearing toward this in implementing the Common Core. Now, the Common Core was initiated by the National Governors Association and the Council for Chief State Schools Officers, really focusing on three things: resulting in college career readiness, making sure that we have research to support this, and that we have fewer, higher, and more clear standards for students to achieve. We had this mile-wide and inch-deep curriculum or standards in the state of California. If you're a teacher, you know that, or even a parent, that we spend a short amount of time on a number of different concepts and skills. And so the intent of Common Core is to allow us to go deeper into those and to focus more heavily on specific skills that students will need to be college and career ready. This state-led effort, not a federal mandate, as many people are led to believe, are for English and math standards. They're not science or social studies standards. What they do have are literacy standards in literacy standards in grades 6, 12, science, social studies, and career technical subjects. And we're working with those teachers now on how we implement those. In addition, what you may hear also is the state on September 4th approved the Next Generation Science Standards. The Next Gen Science Standards are not Common Core. They're a separate set of standards specifically for science. Again, they're very similar to Common Core in that they thread from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade, but they're not what we are going to be discussing tonight. And again, the goal for all of this is college and career readiness for all of our students. So these two sets of standards, they replace what we've got in California. Again, clear, consistent, high-level learning goals. And if you look at that date, it's not wrong. The state adopted Common Core on August 2nd, 2010. And here we are, 3 years later, beginning to do the implementation of it. We've been working for a couple years, learning about them, working with teachers, practicing. The Common Core standards are adopted by 45 states, plus the District of Columbia and some US territories. And so there are some states that are out there and have been implementing these for a few years fully. New York and Kentucky are two of them. And so because of this, we've been able to learn a lot from these other states. We've been able to see some of the work that they've done with teacher training, and it's helped guide us in the way in which we're going about the work here in Torrance. Now, standards are not curriculum. Standards are the goal of what we teach. The curriculum is the how. And these include the materials and the pedagogy or the methodology that teachers use in the classroom. And those are determined locally. And so you'll see us go through adoption processes this spring for textbooks in mathematics. And so we adopt these materials locally. We work with our teachers locally to meet these standards, which will get our students ready. So again, the standards have been adopted by the state, and we are now determining and making shifts and changes all the time in the training that we're doing to make sure that we're implementing these standards with the students in mind, so that they're practicing those essential skills that they'll need to be successful. So looking at this graph, excuse me, you can see that the English language arts and math strands. And so in K-12 math, we've got the standards there. In ELA and literacy, they're broken up into a few different areas. You can see K-5 and then 6-12. And then the 6-12 standards are broken up through English language arts. And there's those literacy standards that I mentioned in history, social science, and science and career technical subjects. So it's a nice graphic representation of the Common Core. And I'll explain a little bit later about how they weave all the way back through from 12th grade back through kindergarten. So what can you expect with Common Core? More time focusing and preparing students for college success. Really helping them target those essential skills and making connections. Teachers will be asking them to justify their work and why they got a particular answer. Because it's not necessarily how they go about the answer, it's that they get it and they understand it deep and conceptually. And then also critical reading and writing in all curricular areas. And so when you hear your child come home and say, oh, we don't write in science or we don't write in social studies, we do, and we use evidence, and we ask students to develop arguments and support those arguments with evidence from a variety of different sources that they'll do research on. And so now we're going to take a little bit closer look at some of the English language arts standards. So here you see the 4 anchor standards for college and career readiness. They're reading, writing, speaking, listening, and language. And within each of these strands, there are separate college and career readiness anchor standards that provide the basis for Common Core at every grade level throughout the curriculum. So we have a consistency from year to year to year. You have the same standards that are taught, just at an increasingly complex level. And different from the CSTs or the California standards that were adopted back in the 90s, things varied from year to year. There might be a focus on one particular skill in one grade, and then the next grade, not a focus on that skill in something else. And so students were not prepared necessarily for the next level, and that spiraling of skills and building of skill-based knowledge did not occur. And so when we look at English language arts, there are 3 major shifts. One is around nonfiction and building content knowledge through nonfiction. You'll see teachers asking students to read newspapers and do research on the internet and bring in science articles and things in English class, because we're trying to get those students to make those connections via nonfiction text. They'll also be using evidence, as I mentioned earlier, from the text, both literary and informational. And so in a story, they might be reading a fiction book, but will have to make connections to what they're seeing maybe in the scientific community or in an aspect of history that they've studied. And then finally, this idea of practice with complex text and academic language. And when we say text, we don't just mean a book. It can be anything written. It can be something visual. It could be a painting that a teacher brings in. It's anything that the students can use or the teacher can use to support the learning that is happening in that classroom. And so these shifts are meant to be succinct and easily remembered and clearly focused on what students and teachers are working on. In addition, they describe, there are grade-specific standards that describe what students need to know and be able to do at the end of each grade. So when we use this backward mapping design, and I'm going to show you a slide where the creators and the writers of the Common Core standards started with what are these skills that are essential for college career readiness, and then they worked backwards to what does that look like in all the grade levels all the way back through kindergarten. And so here's a graphic that maybe represents that. This is the reading strand for English language arts. And so in kindergarten, you'll see this same thing. And some of you that have kindergarten or first graders, you'll see in the achievement report already that you've been sent home, some of these same language, key details or key ideas and details, craft and structure, knowledge and integration of ideas. And each of these 10 elements in the reading strand are the same in kindergarten, 5th, 7th, 12th grade. And so what they do is they're asking students to do the same skill, practice the same skill, just at a higher level, complex thinking, and so they can go deeper into that. And so that's one of the things that I think you'll see tonight in the English sessions is how does that look maybe in kindergarten versus 3rd grade. This is a chart showing the information and literacy, the literature and informational texts that students are expected to read under Common Core. And so you'll see it's about a 50-50 split in 4th grade, but by the time they get to 12th grade, it's 70% informational and nonfiction. This mirrors the work that people have to do in college and careers. And if you think about yourself, how often in your line of work do you refer to literature? Unless that is your line of work, of course. But most of it in technology and technical subjects, and you're presenting reports or whatever it be, most of the work in the reading that you do is information and nonfiction, and you need to be able to break that down and explain that to people. So, scaffolding for complex text. We don't expect students to do this work on their own. The standards require that students read the appropriate complex text at each grade level. And so this is just one specific example. I said I was going to kind of give you a broader view. But we want to support, and that's what scaffolding means. It means supporting students through this. And that's where you as parents play a critical role in helping your student master what might be difficult reading material for them, whether it be something assigned by a teacher, something that you maybe give them to read. And so that's what we want you to take away tonight, are some strategies that you can use as a parent in order to help your child through this. And so just for example, when we're looking at complex text, starting to rain. We want students to read things multiple times. And so if you just ask your student, read it once and then answer the questions, that's not going to work for many students. And so sometimes maybe reading things once just reading it over and then asking them a question. Okay, now I want you to read with this particular thing in mind. Or was there something that wasn't clear about what you read? And then ask them to read that thing, that piece again with that question in mind. And so it's okay. We're trying to tell students it's all right if you read things multiple times. You can't be expected to read something once and fully understand it and grasp the level of complexity that we're asking you to do. Reading aloud, whether it's an elementary child you have or middle school or sometimes even high school, just going through a difficult piece of text and reading it aloud sometimes helps. Chunking text. So a teacher might send home a larger article, say, but they only want the student to read a particular piece of it. That's what we call chunking, where you take a little bit at a time. All of these strategies really are the kinds of supports that students need while they're reading, as opposed to saying, we're gonna learn all the vocabulary words before, for example. We're looking to try to help them learn the vocabulary in the context of whatever kinds of work they're doing. Those of you that remember biology in high school, a lot of vocabulary in biology. And so when you just learn it as parts, it maybe doesn't make as much sense. But when you learn it in the context of something else and you can apply it and make those connections, that's really what we're trying to get to. So a couple strategies on helping your child with literacy. I went over a couple. One is to ask your child specific questions about what they read. And not necessarily the facts, but make them predict what might happen next, or what do you think the theme is of what you read, or what's the moral to the story. Also encourage students to read nonfiction texts. I know my daughter likes to read all these mystery novels, but getting her to read something that's a little bit more difficult and in the nonfiction realm is a little more is tougher. And so some of you have students that just love biographies. Encourage that. Have them read that about all different kinds of people. Looking at reading newspapers and magazines, and there's so much available online that students can do that on a regular basis, even when you're not around or if you don't subscribe to a magazine or a newspaper. There's also a lot of resources available to them at school. Encouraging them to read topics of interest, and maybe not something you're interested in, but find something they're interested in, trains, and have them read all about trains and the mechanics of it and the history of it. And so, that's another way that is a good strategy to get them reading and building this repertoire of skills. So we're going to shift now onto math and talk about the 3 shifts in math. 1 is focus, 2 is coherence, and 3 is rigor. And the Common Core standards were modeled after the standards of high-performing countries, and focusing more on a narrow set of concepts as opposed to the mile-wide, inch-deep. And we need to make room for this kind of learning and this deeper understanding to occur. So as we have teachers think about what are those essential skills, we use the key ideas as a guide here. And so in kindergarten through grade 5, they're really focusing on establishing a solid foundation of the skills, right? And fractions and decimals and the different kinds of numbers, and really deeply understanding how numbers work and what makes that conceptual understanding to go along with the skills. In middle school, they're preparing for geometry, advanced algebra, and probabilities and statistics, and higher levels of math, calculus. The Board of Education approved in September our middle school math progression. And so you'll still see some students be accelerated in taking algebra or geometry honors at the high schools in 8th grade. Some students will be in algebra in 8th grade, and some students might need a grade 8 math, Common Core in 8th grade, which is still really, really challenging. And so your middle school principals and teachers and upper elementary teachers and administrators will be working with parents at those respective levels to be able to educate you on what is this shift that's going to happen next fall. And so those are questions that I could talk about tonight, but it would probably not pertain to all of you, nor would it interest all of you. And so, really, we're working with our teachers now and our principals of having those conversations, identifying students on which progression they're going to be in involved in next year in the middle school. And then finally, high school. They're course-based standards, but again, more conceptual understanding, still geometry, still algebra 2, trigonometry, and pre-calculus and calculus. And so, really trying to push students to, again, that making connections to the real world, application-based math, where they're seeing how certain elements of mathematics applies to problems in science, technology, and many other fields. And so again, some strategies about how you can help your child in math. One, the younger kids, or if they haven't got them yet, just practicing those facts, addition, subtraction, multiplication, while you're driving in the car or sitting at a dinner table. Encouraging them not to give up. So the math standards have mathematical practices that go along with them. There's 8 mathematical practices that will be shared with you. One of them is perseverance. And I'm sure you've all worked with your child no matter what age, and they say, I just can't do it. I give up. I'm going to go to the next problem, or I'm not even going to finish it. That's one of the key elements that we're seeing in trying to break students of that habit, to develop that perseverance, to develop the critical thinking, to be able to maybe approach the problem from a different way, or use a strategy that they learned in a different context and apply it to what they're doing. And so there's a lot of research at the university level on grit and perseverance, and that it's not so much what you know, it's do you have the perseverance to learn it and to make it relevant. And so that's actually, I was at a conference about a year and a half ago, and some university presidents were talking that if they could measure that's a greater predictor of success at that university than SAT scores and GPAs, is that level of perseverance. And so, we're really trying to instill that through these mathematical practices with our students. Have children illustrate the math they're thinking in their head and discuss it. This is that justification piece. So a lot of students can do simple math, but maybe they don't, when it becomes a little more difficult, they can't justify it, they can't figure it out. And so that's part of that conceptual understanding, that no matter what age, questioning them and getting them to try to kind of think out loud, even as adults, it's something that we practice in looking at things in different ways. If we don't understand something here, maybe we draw a diagram or try to illustrate something in a different way. And then finally, applying math knowledge to real world experiences. It can be at home, it can be at the library, it can be in a whole variety of different settings that you can do this. So where are we with our implementation plan? You can see 2011-12 was an awareness year. The last couple years are transition. We're in the middle of transition. We're kind of stepping up our professional development for teachers. And so your students might talk about maybe having a substitute a little more often than you previously would, because we're asking teachers to do a lot, and we're trying to give them skills, again, not isolated during the summer, but bring them in for a day or a half a day and teach them some strategies and have them go back and practice, and then come back again and reflect on how did that work and bring evidence of student work. And so this cycle of continuous improvement is something that we're really working on this year. And we'll continue to work on next year through implementation, because we know that we can't just give the teachers a book or resource materials and a couple days of training and expect them to go away and implement these. This is challenging stuff, challenging for them, challenging for the students, and challenging for you parents. And so that's why we're so glad that you're here, because you can hear from the teachers and be able to get some questions answered and know where to go with some of your things that when they come up in the future. Now, just a couple minutes on the new assessment. You may have heard the term before, the Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium, or SBAC. We will also be referring to these assessments as the Smarter Balanced Assessments. There were two different organizations in the country. One was PARCC, that California did not select, and the other one was Smarter Balanced. And so really the idea here is these are online computer-based assessments that students will take. We will get feedback more quickly. We will also have, in the fall of each school year, an interim or a formative assessment where students will take it, the teachers will get feedback on how are the students, where are their skills, so that we can better target the instruction to their needs at that given time. And so this process of using technology to help inform instruction will allow us to improve what we're doing and improve the learning that's happening in the classroom. For the Smarter Balanced Assessments, again, some of you, we piloted these in a few schools last year just to check the technology and the infrastructure. This year, like I said, we'll be giving, the state will tell us based on demographic data which schools and which grades and which subject areas we're going to be assessing. But again, no data will come back from that. But there are short responses. There are extended responses and a performance task. So there's a human element to the grading. And so while much of it will come back quickly to us, some will take a little bit longer because people will be grading these written pieces. And along with the implementation of this, we will be also looking at our technology plan as districts across the state are. And across the country. And so we'll be working with teachers on how do we make sure students are able to keyboard adequately in third and fourth grade, and what are some of the other challenges that we're going to run up against. And so we're currently working on those so that we can get some of that ironed out prior to field testing in 2014, but certainly to prepare our students for the first round of Smarter Balanced Assessments in the fall or in the spring of 2015. So what can you as parents do? Just get informed, stay in touch with what's happening at your school via school letters, our district website, on the internet. There are many different resource guides. You'll get a couple tonight as handouts in the classrooms. The National PTA and California California PTA have on their website parent guides. And so it's almost too much information for you. To put this together, I went through all of those. I went through the Council for Great City School stuff. I pulled stuff from other state departments of education because it really is overwhelming. So just like we want students to chunk their learning, we want you to chunk your learning in this. If you want to know about a specific element, look at that and read it and ask questions because it's easy to quickly become kind of overloaded with the information that's out there. Get involved, talk to your child's principal or the teacher about what's happening, and then also just kind of know that this is coming, and maybe help your students get some nonfiction books or encourage them to read a biography or two or some other nonfiction stuff and that you have available to you at the libraries, and again make connections with mathematics and what's happening. So additional resources, and again, you don't copy all these down. It'll be on the website. Council for Great City Schools has some really good roadmaps for parents in particular grade levels. So again, you'll get one of those tonight. National PTA has some good things. Organization Achieve the Core. And this last one, the Teaching Channel, is really kind of meant for teachers and administrators, but I put it on there because I think as parents, you'd find it very, very interesting. You can see what does Common Core look like in a particular classroom, and there are video clips, very well done, that are on there that you can read. So if you have questions, tonight, you can, after the sessions, there are question cards I know that have been distributed. There are some in the back that if you have questions that aren't answered by the time you leave tonight, write something down. We're going to be compiling a frequently asked questions section on our website to be able to do that. Speak to your teacher or principal. Email our public information officer, Tammy Kahn, and she will route your question to the person that's best going to be able to answer that question, and we'll get back to you very quickly. You can submit questions via the TUSD website. Hang out. I'll be here. A few of the other administrators will be here. You can ask questions to after the breakout sessions. But most importantly, want to thank you for coming and thank you for taking this interest in your child's education and coming out on a rainy night when the World Series is on to be able to learn about this.